You'd like to write faster. You'd like to be more efficient. You'd like to automate your process. Here's how you can do it. First, decide that you're gonna use 4 main types of stories. A story named opposition, your characters will face another group or another individual and will have to stop them. Collection, your characters have to gather a certain amount of item, collection of item. Investigation, your characters have to find a certain information by a certain time. Generally, it is to find a perpetrator. And finally, escape. Your characters have to rescue someone else or get out of a dangerous situation or setting. The fact that you're using these 4 types of stories and that you're aware that you're using these 4 types of stories, because there's mainly only these 4 types plus other 2, allows you to create a sequence. It allows you to automate your process. It's the most efficient way to automate your process. Let's say you're writing a book or a movie which has 10 chapters. Now that you've decided that you're going to use only these 4 types of stories, you can generate sequence more easily depending on the rhythm you want to give to your story. You'll have to consider the synergy between these different types of stories. For example, if you're choosing to follow the sequence presented here, which is opposition in chapter 1, or said differently, a conflict or a crisis in chapter 1, then collection in chapter 2, which will allow you to present your world, for your character to discover your world, then investigation in chapter 3, then opposition in 4, escape in 5. No, maybe the second crisis in chapter 4 is the character captured and now they have to escape. Investigation in chapter 6 and 7, they want to know who captured them and why they have been captured. Chapter 8, they oppose this individual. Chapter 9, collection. And chapter 10, escape again. Now you want to consider the synergy between all these parts that allowed you as an author to generate this sequence. Because now you've generated the sequence, you know that you have a certain degree of flexibility, and if you've understood by writing, by writing repeatedly, if you're starting to understand, to be aware of the combination between these 4 types of stories, you can generate more cohesive sequences faster. Now you want to consider the synergy that exists between the 4 stories themselves, but also the synergy between these 4 stories and the 4 main genres that we're using in our courses. Now, opposition will often be paired with action. Opposition is a fight, it's a combat, it's a competition, so it's easier to articulate it with action. Escape is easier to articulate with horror. That's the, fear in this situation is the dominant emotion. Same thing for collection and adventure, because a collection is by definition a type of story where you have to visit multiple places, speak to multiple people, which puts it very close to investigation, and that's why collection and investigation are so close, and why drama and adventure are so close. So there's a higher degree of synergy between these 2, for example, than between adventure and horror, for example. And here, by collecting objects, your characters have the ability to discover your world. So that's the moment where you can present your world. That's where you show your world building skills. Drama, investigation, same thing. Drama, mystery, romance, maybe to some degree, thriller. All of that is part of it. All of that are investigation stories. You have to consider the different type of drama sub frames to create investigation story. So again, for the most popular drama, you got mystery, you got the thriller, you got film noir, you've got romance. You got all these subgenres, these frames inside drama, and they all fit investigation quite well. So consider these 4 types of stories and the 4 main types of genre and articulate them. So for a transition for our next part, consider that now you have only 20 minutes to write each scene, and each scene will follow the structure of one of these stories. If you want to become a faster writer, start to think in terms of scenes. The scene, which is the scale under the chapter, which itself is the scale under the book, which itself is the scale under the series, is the best scale to think about in terms of efficiency. If you're thinking at the scale of a scene, you'll be able to improvise faster and therefore to generate ideas and content faster. Now, let's suppose we're thinking in terms of monthly basis for that. Let's suppose you decided to write 10 pages a day for the upcoming 30 days. So for the upcoming month, you've decided to write 10 pages a day. You can give yourself 2 hours. 2 hours is a reasonable amount of time when it comes to writing 10 pages. Now, how much time should you allocate for each of these pages? Well, by making a simple division, you realize that it's just 12 minutes. But let's suppose you want to have a little bit more flexibility. Each of your pages will take you around 15 to 20 minutes. Or let's say, because you're thinking in terms of scene here, each of your scenes should take you between 15 and 20 minutes. You don't have to finish the scene in this amount of time. You just have to finish the idea of the scene, which is why you want to start with the final line of the scene. If you can write down the final line of the scene, you have a clear trajectory of where you're going. So it's easier to finish the scene faster. So let's suppose you want to write 10 pages a day for the upcoming month, and you're giving yourself between 15 and 20 minutes for each scene. Now, where does that leave you? If you want to implement this principle, you want to consider that whichever, and it is a generalization of the principle here, because it was just an example. You want to consider cutting your time in half. Whatever the amount of time you're taking right now to write, let's say 10 pages again, because you may be taking 3, 4, 5 hours maybe to write 10 pages. Whatever the amount of time you need right now, try to cut it in half and write the same amount of pages. To apply some form of proportionality here, if you're intending to write 5 pages in 1 hour, you're still following the logic correctly. So whichever amount of pages you want to write right now, and if you have no definite idea of how many pages you should write every day, we recommend 10 pages. We recommend 10 pages. You may not reach that, and it's not a problem. It's just a goal. Your goal may be to write 10 pages. You don't have to write 8 pages. You can write, 7, 8. It's good, because at the end of the month, you've acquired the skill of writing more, of becoming more efficient, and that's what you're aiming for here. So the generalization of the principle is whatever the amount of pages you have in mind right now, whatever the amount of time you have in mind right now, you put them together and you cut the amount of time in half and still produce the same amount of pages. That's the goal here. Now, let's suppose you're functioning at a monthly scale. Where does it leave you? If you're able to write 10 pages a day, at the end of the month, it's 300 pages. That's a significant amount of pages. You've written a book in a month, the scale. If you're functioning at a weekly scale, you will need 21 pages a day, a little bit more than that, in fact, to write 150 pages. So you may want to compare these two numbers. So we have 300 pages on one side and 150 pages on the other side. And the amount of pages produced per day is approximately doubled. So if you can write 21 pages a day for a week. The next experience, the next type of exercise you want to try is writing 21 pages a day for 2 weeks, and then 21 pages a day for 3 weeks, and finally 21 pages a day for a month. Once you've reached that, if you can maintain this rhythm, which is quite a high, the advanced rhythm here, you may not want to try that if you're a beginner writer, but you may want to try that if you're a beginner writer which want to advance quite fast. If you can maintain this volume for a month, you will be able quite easily to write 300 pages a month. So think of it this way. If you start at a weekly scale to write 20 pages a day, and then you can scale up to the monthly scale, you can imagine that you can write 600 pages a month approximately. So from there, writing 300 pages a month will not be so difficult. So what do you do in order to implement the principle here? You try to do it in half the time. Because realize here, we're just putting the number of pages a day, but there's no time limit here. You know, you may be writing 10 pages a day in 5 hours, for example, or 10 pages a day in 4 hours. So whichever is your situation. So first, fix the number of pages you want to write, then fix the amount of time you think you can write them in, and finally cut it in half. That's the best way to become more efficient. So calibrate that to the fact that you have 4 story types, which will help you to go faster, and then get to the next section to know how you need to create your characters in order to get faster. If you want to become a faster writer, you'll need the help of your characters. Having 4 character profiles, having 4 character roles, having 4 characters archetype will help you to gain in terms of focus. Now, these 4 character types articulate with the 4 types of stories. The color code here, the color code used here is made for you, isn't the synergy. Now, you realize quite fast that you can generate the very same type of sequence, when it comes to focus on one character point of view, in the same manner that you generated a sequence when it comes to focusing the action of a scene, of a chapter on a certain type of story. So if you have these 4 points of view and you want to focus on one character more than the others, because this sequence is quite balanced. I try to balance here the 4 type of point of view. But you may want to focus the action on the enticer type of character, for example. And in this manner, you can write chapter 1 enticer, chapter 2 enticer, chapter 3 arbiter maybe, chapter 4 enticer, chapter 5 enticer, chapter 6 rival, chapter 7 enticer, chapter 8 enticer, chapter 9 and 10 arbiter. So that would make a story which is quite focused on the enticer, which would be here the protagonist, and to some extent to the arbiter, which would be the main antagonist in the situation. Now let's study this sequence. Enticer, chapter 1. What's the role of the enticer? The enticer helps you to present your world. It helps the public to discover your world. Chapter 2, rival. What's the role of the rival? Adding some conflict, adding some trouble. So it's a good way to present another character, another significant character, maybe an antagonist in chapter 2. Chapter 3, advisor. Chapter 3 is a crisis chapter, so it's a good thing to add a supporter here, the advisor, in chapter 3. Chapter 4, enticer. Maybe your main character has suffered a great loss and now she had to think about herself and her condition. Chapter 5, arbiter. Maybe now the main antagonist is presented. Chapter 6, advisor. Now you need to reaffirm the link between your main character and her main support. Chapter 7, Enticer. Now again, it's the main character, the protagonist here, which will discover new abilities she has or redefine her goal. Chapter 8, Arbiter. Again, you refine the relationship between your protagonist, the Enticer, and her main supporter, the Arbiter. Chapter 9, Rival. Again, your Enticer will have to face one of her antagonists, which is the rival here. And finally, Chapter 10, Arbiter. Now, your protagonist, the Enticer, has to face her main antagonist. So it's quite an easy way to generate stories, and you have to combine them again with the 4 story types and the 4 genre types in order to have these sequences which will be automated in the end. It's a great way also to know your character better, because this way you can focus on their goal. Try to summarize their goal in one sentence. It's an easier way to go. It's clearer for you. It's clearer for the readers. It's clearer for the characters and to establish characters' relationships. And if you can summarize the goal of each of these 4 characters in one sentence, it allows you to understand the synergy between these 4 character goals more easily. Then once you've did that, try to think about the synergies between the goals of the story. The goal is at the story scale, and the stakes. Now, the goals are at the story scale, so it's for your whole story, your whole movie, your whole book, your whole game. The stakes are at the scene scale, so in each scene your characters will have to make choices. Remember, if you can give them 3 choices, it's best. And these choices, whatever the choices here are, will lead to an outcome. So it's 1 outcome per choice at least, knowing that you have multiple characters. But if we keep it simple here, you have 3 choices as the character, and each of them will lead to 1 outcome at least. So you want to think about the synergy between goal and stakes. What does it bring you? Well, for one, you understand how your character will advance in the sequence, because now you know that regarding this example, your main character, your protagonist, the Enticer, is the focal point of 3 chapters out of 10, and in these 3 chapters the character will have to reaffirm her goal, because her goal will change. How will it change? Well, it will change thanks to the help of a supporter, and probably through the interaction with one of our main antagonists. So that's every time your character will interact with another character, she'll have to make choices, and these choices will lead her to a certain outcome. So you want to think about the synergy between the scene level, the scene scale, and the story scale, which is why we're really focusing on scenes here. If you want to become more efficient, if you want to become faster, focus on the scene level. First, before starting your book, always define your sequence. Always define your sequence of events, which character you'll focus on and which type of your story you're using. So then when you're starting to write, you can focus solely on the action in the scene, which will make your writing both more efficient and deeper. More on depth in the next section. If you want to become a faster writer or a better writer faster, you will need help. You want to be able to write 10 pages a day in approximately 2 hours. If you can write 10 pages a day in 1 hour, it's even better. And now that you're producing all these pages, all this content, you'll need people to read them. Now, how do you pick these people? So first, you want people close to you, because they have more motivation. If you can find 4, it's better. But if you can find 4 literal individual, 4 persons, try to find an amount of person, maybe 1 other person, 2 other person, 3 other person, which can fulfill these 4 different roles. Why? Well, your public, your readers, will fall into 4 main categories. Why is that? Because your readers, and in fact there are more than 4 categories, but we'll limit ourselves to 4 here. But let's just say that as a general rule, your readers will refer themselves to your characters. They will identify to certain characters more than others. Now, there's a direct correlation here, and you may see it by the patterns used, because we're using the same color code since the beginning of this episode, between the 4 story types. So there are people which will resonate more with opposition, people which will resonate more with collection, other with investigation, other with escape. The 4 characters type, there are people which will love rivals, other which will love enticers, others will absolutely feel connection with your advisor type of character, other with your arbiter type of character, because it all depends on the goal of the character and the goal of the reader. And because of that, you need these 4 types of reader. You need this diversity of wedges in your public, of fringes, of categories really in your public, because all of them will serve to give you a better story. But a better story will really mean a more diverse story. That's all that better means here. These 4 types of readers: the challenger, which is, well, accommodated and articulated with the rival and the action genre; the cooperator, which is closer to the enticer and the adventure genre; the accompanier, which is closer to the advisor, supporter, and the drama genre; and the ponderer, which is closer to the arbiter and the horror genre, will all help you to read and reread your book faster, because they will be reading it multiple times for you while you're writing. So that's a gain of efficiency here. That's some team management. Now, diversity is the most essential element when it comes to creating a story which will generate attachment. If we rephrase it, attachment is the end goal of every story. Attachment is your end goal as a writer. You want your public to attach themselves to your characters, to your environments, to your world, to your story. So, considering that you have multiple type of public, here, defined here by these 4 keywords. Again, you can get to up to 12 different type of profiles, but we'll keep it at 4 here. Will allow you to develop in this situation both efficiency and depth. No, that's the goal of diversity here. Efficiency and depth. Efficiency generates depth, depth generates efficiency. So your world becomes more cohesive, when it comes to depth. And you generate more material faster, so your world becomes more extensive. So that's really what diversity helps you to generate. Diversity leads to more attachment. And when people get attached to something, they want more of it. So that's why you need 4 types of reader. You need to identify these 4 types of reader, and if they can get close to you, if there are people which are close to you, it's even better. Now, how does it work? How does this system work? Your writing should become a reward. Each of your stories should become gifts. You should give these stories to these 4 readers. So you have to focus, you have to focus first and foremost on these 4 readers. They are your first public. You have to give them everything with your stories. That's for them. Now, we have a synalagmatic relationship here. This reward is felt mutually. It's a reward for you because you can generate stories and you want to generate stories. And it's a reward for them because these stories are directed toward them. Now, consider empathy here. If you're able to write a story which can satisfy 4 people fully, you can write a story which can satisfy these 4 categories of people at a larger scale. And that's where you're gonna scale up your selling abilities, really, because you're able now to scale your story to a very large public. So now remember, you want to satisfy, you want to reward, you want to offer your story to 4 people. These 4 type of people, these 4 type of public. And in the beginning, if you can't find 4 people to help you, really think about them conceptually. Think about the 4 archetypes first. The challenger, the cooperator, the accompanier, and the ponderer directly relate to your rival, enticer, advisor, and arbiter. So create a direct correlation between these 2 profiles, which will help you to treat your characters better as well. So think about your story as a reward. You're writing, and the more you write, the more attached they get to your story. The more attached they get, the more they want. The more they want, the more they can contribute to your story. And here's how you're gonna use your free time. Breaks will be the time for feedback. Because if you're able to generate stories which people will think about all the time, they will want to talk about it all the time. So when you're not writing, you're gonna be listening. Listen to the feedback. If you don't know which questions to ask, or if they're hesitant to answer, to speak, there are 3 main questions, and we have a list of we'll probably make a video of a list of the 25 most important questions to analyze a story. But here, for now, are the 3 main questions you want to ask your public when it comes to any material you're generating. What would you want more of, in terms of character, in terms of environment, in terms of stories? Do they want more of this type of environment, more of this type of situation? Do they want to see this character more? What should be done differently? So you've written your story, you outline your sequence, and you're finished to write it. Now, what do the public, what do your 4 readers remember the most, and what do they remember less? So what they will remember the most, they will want more, because that's what they love. What they will remember less, maybe you can ask them how you can do it differently. So what do you want more of? What should be done differently? And how should it be done according to you? And always ask for a process. When you're asking for feedback, if you want it to be useful feedback, ask for a modification process. You need steps. Okay, the person might tell you, I want this character to be different. I think her goal hasn't been developed enough. I would develop her goal more by, for example, putting her in more scenes, by making her say this sentence, by making her do this, accomplish this action, for example. Allow them to be specific. Allow them some time to be as specific as possible, because if they're specific, you take this idea and you implement it in your next story. You take this idea and you implement it to another character that they will love, because now if it's the accompanier, for example, which tell you, I'd like to see more of this character. I love her. I'd like to see her more because I relate to her. Now, can you create another character that's like her, but which has a different goal? And you let the accompanier give you the different goal. She gives you the different goal, and now you have a new story. And in this new story, you have one of the 4 new characters, which is this character. And it's done. So that's the final part of this episode, and that's the most important part, really. You want to find 4 readers. These 4 readers will correspond to your 4 characters. They will attach themselves to your 4 characters. And just as a last note, the challenger will not always relate directly to the rival. The cooperator will not directly always relate to the enticer. You know, you have to think about it this way: the challenger can relate to the rival, she can relate to the enticer, and she can relate to the arbiter. You know, it's a matter of proximity. It's not always one profile corresponds to one type of character. It can be multiple types. Not all of them, generally it's one type of reader for 3 types of characters. So you want to find your 4 readers because you want to create more diversity in your story, because diversity will allow you to create cohesion and to extend your world. You want to make every niche of your story a gift for these 4 people. You're writing for these 4 people now. You're writing for helping them. And how much off time you have, you know, whatever the amount of off time you have, spending thinking on your stories, because the more you think about it, it will be the easier it will be to write it down. Listen to the ideas and sometimes even implement them directly. Again, everything is good for economy. Suggest us the content you need. This channel is made for you.